10 reasons why you should play Cybercorp. I fell down the stairs this morning, so, I think it's going to be a good day. The sun is shining, robots are shooting each other, just feels right, When I finished playing through the story of Cybercorp for the first time, my impression was that the game was good, but not great. I was struggling with whether a focus video like this or a smaller part of a 3-game video would be better. However, after finishing the story, I continued playing on a harder difficulty as the design intends, and my enjoyment of the game increased exponentially, like recreationally falling down carpeted stairs for the first time when you're used to hardwood. Beating levels on normal difficulty generally unlocks the harder difficulty, and so I went back to the very first level and started playing through on hard. Even though the enemies were stronger, my gear and weapons were at such a high level from beating the game and from exuding centeredness that I blissfully ice skated my way through them in a barrage of beautiful chaos. Kintsugi is the ancient Japanese art of fixing a broken object, usually pottery, with urushi liqueur, which is food safe, mixed with silver, gold, or even platinum. Modern methods sometimes substitute liqueur for epoxy, but then it's not food safe. How am I supposed to eat my yakisoba out of this, Henrietta? I mean, dang. Trying to make me BP out the A or what? Trying to give me that tummy yuck, tell you what. The purpose of Kintsugi is to highlight the history and journey of an object and to show that it is not worse for having suffered damage, but it is actually improved, a fair lesson to be learned. It is about finding beauty in brokenness. I did not fix pottery, but I did find beauty in the brokenness of the enemy thugs and droids as I trounced my way through them like a wet paper bag. I discovered the critical error of my first playthrough, which severely limited my enjoyment, which was that I didn't try to be overpowered, I just tried to get through the level. I temporarily forgot something about myself that I've known since Pokemon Blue on the original Game Boy, which is that in RPGs, I usually get the most satisfaction out of grinding a lower level to become overpowered and then breezing through sections that are meant to be difficult. It's satisfying not only to beat difficult bosses with ease, but also to know that I put in the time and legwork to earn those levels and stats, which made things easy. Once I made this course correction in Cybercorp, I had a whole new appreciation for the game, as my interest and enthusiasm suddenly reignited around me. Eventually the enemy level caught up to my gear level, but I did not make the same mistake twice. I did some grinding on side missions and replayed certain levels to get stronger loot and exude centeredness. That way I could always maintain a slight advantage in power level. Games like this are just more fun that way for me. Like I said, you can earn that satisfaction with just a little bit of loot grinding, which is kind of the whole point of looter shooters and loot-based RPGs in the first place. That's enough of an introduction. Time for the meat and potatoes. 10 reasons. Reason number 1. The loot depth and variety is wild. The loot is always one of the most enticing factors of a game like this, and Cybercorp does not disappoint. There are many different types of weapons, armor, and gear. There are many different families and styles within those types. Each weapon has a kinetic version and an energy version, which both behave very differently. Many weapons have slots that you can attach gear to, which the game calls cards. These can have wildly different effects, from increasing damage, fire rate, weapon knockback, elbow tenderness, movement speed, the distance of your combat slide, the frequency with which your grandma makes chocolate chip cookies, and more. Each weapon has 10 or more stats, as well as a DPS level and a power level. You can use these stats to see what works for you and to find what you're looking for. For example, if you're noticing a gun is really fun, but it takes too long to reload, these stats allow you to find a gun that reloads faster. For some players, it's a really satisfying and engaging experience to get deep into the numbers. However, it's not necessary. You could 100% ignore those stats and just pay attention to the power level and DPS of a weapon, as long as you keep acquiring guns of a higher level and try out new types of guns now and then. That would perfectly carry you through the game without having to get too involved with the numbers, if that's not your thing. I typically drifted between careful loot analysis and dumb brain gun make big boom methodology. Both are enjoyable and effective. As you would expect, you collect loot from fallen enemies, chests, and mission rewards. There's also a forge where you can upgrade literally any piece of gear in the game, so if you find a weapon or something that you really enjoy and you're not ready to let go of, instead of switching to a newer weapon, you can just upgrade its level in the forge. This is a really cool feature, and it increases the amount of options you have at all times, which is great. However, with this feature, you do run the risk of falling in love with a piece of gear and never wanting to let it go, which can work for you sometimes, but other times it can actually hinder your experience. For example, I had a little common rarity energy pistol which acted like a shotgun, and I upgraded it 18 times throughout the game, and it carried me all the way through my first playthrough. Even though that was pretty cool, I eventually found that even though the stats were the highest in my arsenal, the low-level origin meant it lacked some of the higher-level perks, card slots, and advantages of weapons found later in the game. It was semi-automatic, which meant I could never hold down the fire button, and once I forced myself to let go of it in my second playthrough, the game became immensely more enjoyable as I eventually found more powerful weapons without being upgraded, which were fully automated so I could comfortably hold down the fire button. One of them would even randomly rain down grenades on my enemies while I reloaded, which was a fun surprise and saved me more than once. Finally letting go of that rusty pistol shotgun literally opened up a brand new world of gameplay. Reason number 2. Incredible variety of playstyles. Almost every piece of gear can potentially change the way you play the game and be used to create a particular build that you choose to intentionally shape your playstyle. There is an enormous amount of equipable skills to choose from that can do just about anything. They can deploy turrets or drones, they can inflict damage in a large variety of ways, they can heal you or your party instantly, or create an area of effect type healing. They can be used to physically maneuver around your opponent or strategically shift things in your favor. They can push the enemy around like the kid who always wanted your milk money because his mom didn't know what latchkey was. Most of the enemies are robots of some kind, so one of the skills lets you hack all surrounding enemies so they fight for you. There's Molotov cocktail type stuff, there's bonus shield generators. One skill basically lets you throw a black hole at your enemies, so, you can check that off your bucket list. There's a firebomb skill, there's a deployable shield skill. One skill pats you on the head and tells you you're a good boy while ordering pizza. I mean, I'm telling you, these things are crazy. It's not just the guns either. The armor for various regions of the body also live within families that are geared towards certain playstyles. Some prioritize mobility and effects, while others simply focus on being a bullet sponge and trying to absorb as much damage as they can. And just to reiterate, many of these things have card slots available, which means you can add additional effects that are specific to that type of gear. For example, I added a particular card to my energy sword that changed the way I swung the sword to make the third hit more deliberate and destructive and knocked my opponents back. Some of them also look like lightsabers, which doesn't affect the variety of playstyle, but +1 for cool points. At one point I had a burst rifle and I didn't really like the way it handled, but the damage was incredibly high, so I looked into the cards, upgraded some of them in the forge, and then added 2 increased fire rate cards to that burst rifle, which not only increased the DPS significantly, but also changed the way the gun handled and made it more enjoyable and effective. This game is all about playstyle and options and the incredible freedom granted within them. Reason number 3. The visual aesthetic is gorgeous. I'm going to say some non-controversial opinions. Cyberpunk environments are pretty to look at. Minimalism is easy on the eyes. Bright contrasting colors really pop and look nice. Lasers are cool, dude. This game contains all these things and more. The visual aesthetic of this game is beautiful, it keeps things simple and sometimes low poly, but still looks very sharp. Depending on your platform, you might be able to turn on anti-aliasing in the menus, which actually made my game image look much sharper. I would recommend it if you can. Without going into too much detail for the Art Club homies, this game just looks very good, especially if you can appreciate neon-drenched minimalism in an isometric cyberpunk city. Reason number 4. The cyberpunk sound design fosters an invigorating, dismal, and yet hopeful ambiance that improves the overall experience, which is a fancy way of saying, "No, this game sounds good in my ears though!" The pulse of the game picks up when you step into a combat encounter. The high energy of the synth and tech-heavy EDM dances beside you as you quickly and efficiently dispatch cybergoons, futuristic Roombas mounted with machine guns, and Amazon delivery drones that have gained self-awareness and just don't like your attitude. There's a lot of different music for both chaotic and simple areas. It's generally all very good. There's even a music player in your home base where you can change and sample all the unlocked music. The sound effects of the menus, weapons, and abilities all feel very at home in this universe. The music is not going to win any Lifetime Achievement Awards for revitalizing the genre, but when you put your favorite sauce on your favorite sauce-receptive food, whatever you like, I don't know, monkfish, do you furrow your brow because the sauce is not revolutionary, or do you give it a solemn nod of approval because of a job well done? Probably neither, because you don't care about non-existent sauce feelings, and it shows! However, this game's sound design is the sauce, and it does the job quite well. Reason number 5. Overall depth of the game in terms of content, menus, and mechanics. I already talked about the crazy depth of the loot and the variety of playstyles, but there's also a lot of depth to the game as a whole. It takes a minute to familiarize yourself with the menus, but once you do, you'll see there's a lot of content, a lot of cool stuff to do, and a lot of options available to the player. When you hit the menu button, you have regular system stuff like settings and multiplayer setup. Then you can tab over to your mission map with your right bumper or R1. The mission map lets you cycle through all active, completed story or side mission tabs. That could be very useful for navigating what you're trying to do, be that loot grinding, progressing, or exploring side missions. Hit R1 or right bumper again and you're on your character tab. This tab lets you cycle through sub-tabs of equipment, stats, and a visual section that does what other games would call transmogrify. Basically, you can select skins for your armor to make them look different. The equipment sub-tab is where you'll do most of your equipping and comparing of loot. The stats sub-tab basically gives you an overall numerical representation of what your current gear is doing for you. Again, you can't ignore all that completely, but some people will get into it. Hit the bumper again and you have the Forge tab where you can upgrade cards, skills, weapons, and armor. Hit the bumper again and you're on the Shop tab where you can buy back recently sold weapons or shop for a brand new piece of equipment. The shop itself is rotating, but you can also choose to refresh the selection. Hit the bumper again and you'll be in the Codex where it just gives you a wealth of information about everything in the game, from the characters to the story to the enemies and pretty much everything else you can imagine. Hit the bumper again and you'll be in the Inventory tab. I think I used this one single time when I was having trouble finding something, but other than that, it's just a complete collection of every weapon, armor, skill, card, or paint set that you've acquired in the game. I go through all this just to give you an idea of exactly how much there is to sink your teeth into. This is no shallow, mindless looter shooter. Yet again, the beauty is that its depth is optional and voluntary. Dumb braining this game and only making sure your power level goes up will 100% work if you're willing to change your gear now and then. The mechanical depth has already been made apparent, but I'll put a succinct little bow on it. You choose skills to customize how you're physically going to move through the game. You choose cards to customize guns and armor and decide how these items behave. The gun and armor variety lets you decide how you're going to shoot and manage enemies. The Forge lets you upgrade any piece of gear you have, including cards and skills, to make them more effective at higher levels. The Shop lets you buy weapons outright if recent loot drops haven't been amazing. The Shop can be refreshed for a small cost of in-game currency. The game always has side missions available to collect better loot, hone your skills, try out new weapons, and collect money for upgrades or purchases. It should be pretty obvious, but to be clear, this game has no real money microtransactions. It only uses in-game Monopoly money and Tiger Sweat. There are different types of levels to keep things fresh. Most levels have an element of procedural generation, so even if you farm the same level multiple times, it will probably look fairly different each time. So you don't get tired looking at the same corridor 100 times like the garden gnome that your neighbor put out. You know it's on your side of the property line, but he says it's on his. One of these days it's just going to disappear in the night, like when Dad went to go get milk. No, Ted, I haven't seen your garden gnome. Maybe it's somewhere on your side of the property line. Reason number 6. Replayability through 3 difficulty levels with increasingly powerful loot and a whole array of unlocks and secrets to find. This one is pretty straightforward. The enjoyable part of the game is the actual gameplay, so in other words, it's not one of those story-centered games where you play because of the story, and then you say to yourself, oh, I don't want to play that game again, I've already experienced that entire story. The actual physical act of shooting, dodging, deploying turrets, blowing stuff up, and so on is why you play the game. So replaying on a higher difficulty feels very natural since you're always acquiring better loot, and it extends the playtime to be pretty much as long as you want it to be. Reason number 7. Customization of every single piece of gear visually, but also functionally with upgrade cards. I already mentioned the cards and the skins dynamic, but you can also change the color of any piece of loot pretty much immediately. You can be hot pink and look like a Power Ranger. You can do a serious look. I went for a Star Wars Stormtrooper look. When you take into account cards, skins, and color options, the customization of this game is pretty insane. Reason number 8. Solid twin-stick shooter mechanics. There's no running away from a mob just to turn around, shoot, then turn around and run, then turn around and shoot. You choose where your feet go at all times. You choose where you aim at all times. The movement is fluid and precise. I grew up on Diablo for the PS1, and yes, that game exists for PS1, and it's great. I always wanted to have that experience with twin-stick aiming, though. When I try to play more modern games like Path of Exile, I get frustrated because I'll be fighting a mob as an archer and inevitably have to retreat, but I can't aim backward and shoot, or run backwards and aim. In other words, I'd have to turn around, shoot, turn around, run, turn around and shoot, and repeat over and over again. It's really nice to have a full-blown Diablo-style RPG, albeit in a cyberpunk setting, with twin-stick mechanics. A small team made this game, hence the cheap price, so on occasion there might be a slight hiccup, but overall everything works great. It's nice to finally have multiple games out and on the horizon that offer a Diablo-style RPG with twin sticks. Reason number 9, the price. It's cheap. It took me 9 hours for the main story and a few side missions. There's easily 30 or so hours worth of quality entertainment for a dirt cheap price. We live in a world where people are regularly paying $60, $70, or $80 on games that they do not enjoy, and sometimes they become very upset when these games don't live up to their standards. With a cheap game like this, the disappointment threshold is considerably lower. Even if the game let you down, you barely lost any money. With the description on the store page, and especially with videos like this one, you should know exactly what you're getting into, and if that stuff sounds even remotely good, you'll probably not regret your purchase at all. This game provided me with a greater value per dollar than any game I've played for at least a few years, and I feel like I can still go back to it. Reason number 10, it's easily approachable. It doesn't demand a huge chunk of your time. You can jump into a quick 10-minute mission, or you can spend an hour or two getting better loot, powering up, and experiencing the story. You could play all night, and you might never even get tired of it, especially if you change up your loadout now and then. It's also easily approachable in that its depth is totally optional. You can optimize, maximize, and synergize loot all you want, and that's great. Or you can dad build, turn your brain off, and let sheer brute force and ignorance carry you through, which is also great. The game does not demand much from you, only that you enjoy vanquishing cyber thugs. It's also a simple relationship. You point and shoot. There's not some trick you have to learn to simply be able to play the game. If you can point the cursor toward the enemy, you can have a good time in the game. That pretty much sums it up. It's a very solid and enjoyable game at a very cheap price. It looks great, sounds great, plays great. It's simple yet complex. The story is actually pretty cool and interesting, but it's not going to open your eyes like the first time you had chalky milk. You could say it's about overthrowing an evil mind control empire and freeing its captives, so, you've had slower days at the office. I'd love to stay and chat, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Gotta roll down a hill real quick and think about James Earl Jones, I promised. Also, I'd love to stay and chat. Thanks for stopping by. Tell me about your day in the comments. I appreciate you. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching. Peace out.